Recording entry 47 of the Galactic Military Academy Chronicles, Cadet First Class Zixix Blue Moon speaking. The rumbling beneath our feet was getting stronger. Most of my fellow cadets were already showing signs of stress, their secondary breathing gills fluttering rapidly, tentacles twitching, or in poor Yuri Nova's case, all four of his eyes blinking out of sync. But honestly, who could blame them? We were standing less than a kilometer from the most active volcano on Training Moon Beta, and Commander PX Tal had just announced this would be our final test location. Today's survival training will assess your ability to maintain composure in Class 7 hazardous environments. Commander PX Tal's voice boomed through our neural comms. Her massive frame, covered in iridescent scales, stood out against the dark volcanic rock. This is not a simulation. The danger is real, which means your responses must be real. I felt my own gill flaps quivering but forced them still. As class leader, I needed to set an example. Our training group consisted of the most promising cadets from 17 different species across the Galactic Alliance. We were the best of the best, or at least we were supposed to be. That's when I noticed him. The new transfer student, Marcus Rodriguez, stood at the edge of our group, looking completely unfazed. While the rest of us were wearing full environmental suits with multiple backup systems, he wore only the basic academy uniform with minimal protective gear. His soft, pink-tinted skin was exposed to the toxic gases that occasionally vented from nearby fissures, yet he seemed more interested in the geological readings on his wrist computer than in his own safety. "Quite a view, isn't it?" he said, catching me staring at him. His mouth curved upward in what humans call a smile, a gesture that never failed to send chills down my spinal ridge. How could a species evolve to show their bone-crushing teeth as a sign of friendship? "You're not concerned about the volatile conditions?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as another tremor shook the ground. He shrugged another peculiarly human gesture. "Nah, this is nothing. Mount St. Helens back home was way more exciting during my geological survey internship." Before I could process the insanity of comparing an active volcano to a workplace internship, Commander PX Tal's voice cut through our conversation. "Cadets, form your assigned teams. Your objective is to reach the monitoring station at Point Gamma, collect essential data, and return safely. You have 2 standard hours." I watched as Marcus checked his minimal gear one last time. He looked almost disappointed at the simplicity of our mission. That's when I remembered reading about his home planet, Earth, a death world so extreme that its classification had to be updated 3 times because it kept breaking the hazard scale. A planet where liquid water fell from the sky with enough force to strip scales, where atmospheric pressure fluctuations could pop an unprepared being's organs, and where the very ground periodically split open to spew molten rock. "Hey, team leader," Marcus called out, snapping me from my thoughts. Ready to rock and roll, he paused, then let out a strange barking sound that I later learned was laughter. "Get it? Rock and roll? Because we're on a volcanic moon." I stared at him blankly, my translator struggling with the multiple layers of meaning. Sometimes I wondered if humans were scarier when they were trying to be funny than when they were being serious. "Right," I said, checking my team roster. "You're with Nova and Blackstar. Remember, this is a standard data collection mission. No unnecessary risks, no showing off, and absolutely no last-minute heroics." He gave me another one of those tooth-bearing smiles. When have I ever taken unnecessary risks? I felt my gills flutter again, this time in exasperation. In the 3 weeks since Marcus had joined our class, he'd already redefined necessary risk at least 6 times. There was the incident with the plasma reactor, the unauthorized spacewalk to fix a wobbly satellite, and let's not forget the time he suggested we could save time by sliding down a glass mountain instead of walking around it. As I watched him join his team, I couldn't shake the feeling that this seemingly routine training exercise was about to become anything but routine. The volcano rumbled again, as if agreeing with my premonition. "Begin mission countdown," Commander PX Tal announced. "May the stars guide your path." I took one last look at Marcus, who was now excitedly pointing out something in the volcano's thermal signature to his terrified teammates. What kind of species, I wondered for the 1,000th time, evolved on a planet where treating natural disasters as entertainment was a survival trait? The mission clock started ticking, and with it, our descent into what would become the most memorable and terrifying training exercise in Academy history began. The first warning signs came about 30 minutes into our mission. The ground tremors, which had been relatively predictable, started becoming more frequent and intense. Most teams had made good progress toward Point Gamma, but the changing conditions were affecting everyone's pace well, almost everyone's. "Look at him," Yuri Nova muttered through our private channel, all four of his eyes fixed on Marcus. "He's actually humming." Who hums while walking towards certain doom? I had to admit, it was unsettling. While the rest of us carefully picked our way across the volcanic terrain, Marcus practically bounced from rock to rock, pointing out interesting formations to his teammates. Even more bizarre, he'd started collecting samples, as if this were some casual field trip rather than a high-risk training exercise. "Did you know," Marcus announced to nobody in particular, "that the mineral composition here is remarkably similar to the Kilauea volcano back home? The crystallization patterns in these rocks are fascinating." "Nobody cares about rock patterns when we're about to be cooked alive," Kira Blackstar snapped, her luminescent spots flashing with anxiety. She was one of our top-performing cadets, but even she was showing signs of strain. Marcus just laughed. "Cooked alive? At these temperatures? This is barely hot enough for a decent sauna." The comment sent ripples of unease through our group. It was moments like these that reminded us why humans had earned their reputation across the galaxy. I still remembered my first xenobiology class, where we learned about Earth and its inhabitants. "Listen up," Cadets Commander PX Tal's voice crackled through our comms, interrupting my thoughts. "Seismic activity is increasing beyond predicted levels. All teams maintain high alert status." As if on cue, a massive tremor shook the ground. Several cadets lost their footing, and warning alerts flashed across our environmental suit displays. Through the chaos, I heard Marcus let out a whoop of excitement. "Now this is getting interesting," he exclaimed, steadying Kira before she could fall into a steam vent. "The magma chamber must be pressurizing. Look at those gas emissions." "Interesting," Yuri's voice rose several octaves. "The ground is literally trying to kill us." "The ground is doing what ground does," Marcus replied, now taking readings with his basic risk computer. "On Earth, this would barely qualify as a moderate event. Now, if you want to talk about real excitement, let me tell you about the time I helped monitor the underwater volcano near." "Please don't," several cadets said in unison. That's when Senior Cadet Lisa Chen, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "Is it true what they say about human children playing in areas with similar conditions?" Marcus grinned. "You mean beaches near volcanic zones? Sure. Some of my best childhood memories are from Hawaii. Nothing beats roasting marshmallows over natural steam vents." The revelation sent another wave of murmurs through our group. I'd read the reports, of course we all had. Humans were classified as class of persistent life forms for good reason. They lived on a planet where their concept of weather included superheated air currents that could lift buildings, frozen water falling from the sky, and electrical discharges powerful enough to split trees. They survived in environments ranging from Arctic wastelands to scorching deserts, and somehow managed to thrive. "Focus," Cadets Commander PX Tal interrupted again. "Point Gamma is reporting increased thermal activity. Proceed with extreme caution." I watched as Marcus's expression changed not to fear, but to something that made my blood run cold: curiosity. In my 3 years at the Academy, I'd learned that nothing was more dangerous than a curious human. "Hey Zix," he called out, "those readings can't be right. The pattern suggests something more than standard volcanic activity." Before I could respond, the ground heaved violently. Warning sirens blared through our comms as several monitoring stations went dark. Through the chaos, I saw Marcus pull up a holographic display, his face illuminated by the red emergency lights. "This is wrong," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "The pressure shouldn't be building this fast." Unless his eyes widened with what I horrifyingly recognized as excitement. Unless what Kira demanded, her spots now pulsing with a mix of fear and anger. Unless there's someone or something interfering with the natural processes, Marcus said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "These patterns are too regular, too controlled." That's when we received the emergency broadcast. The research team at Point Gamma had lost control of their experimental geostabilization equipment. The device, designed to prevent dangerous volcanic activity, was now doing the opposite, focusing and amplifying the seismic forces. I watched as Marcus processed this information, and I saw something change in his expression. The casual excitement of earlier was replaced by a focused intensity that reminded me why humans weren't just feared across the galaxy, they were respected. When their playful curiosity turned to determined problem solving, They became forces of nature themselves. Commander Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. Request permission to assist the research team. I have experience with similar geological phenomena. Negative, Cadet Rodriguez. All teams are ordered to retreat to safe distance immediately. Marcus looked at the roiling volcano, then back at his readings. That's when I saw at that particular human expression that every academy instructor had warned us about. The one that meant a human had just decided that rules were more like suggestions. Zix, he said, turning to me with an unnervingly calm expression. You might want to note in your report that I'm about to disobey that order. And that's when things really started to get interesting. The situation at Point Gamma deteriorated faster than anyone could have predicted. Emergency broadcasts flooded our comms, painting a grim picture. Dr. Lena Winters and her research team were trapped inside the monitoring station, which was now surrounded by rapidly forming lava pools. The geostabilization equipment, meant to prevent exactly this type of disaster, had transformed into a doomsday device. Status report, Commander PX Tal's voice cut through the chaos. Research station, respond. This is Dr. Winters, came the strained reply. The equipment's gone haywire. We've lost control of the containment fields. 5 of us are trapped in the main lab, and our environmental systems are failing. The commander's response was immediate. Initiating emergency extraction protocol Beta 7. All rescue units, prepare for deployment. I watched as our academy's most advanced rescue pods launched from the command center. They were supposed to be capable of withstanding extreme conditions, designed specifically for situations like this. The first pod approached the research station, its heat shields glowing as it pushed through the superheated air. It never made it. A sudden burst of pressurized gas caught the pod mid-flight, sending it spinning away like a toy. Second unit, engage backup thrusters and attempt approach from Sector 4, Commander PX Tal ordered, but her voice carried an edge of concern I'd never heard before. The second attempt ended even worse. The pod's shields failed under the intense heat, forcing it to retreat before its systems melted completely. That's when Marcus stepped forward, his eyes fixed on his wrist computer's readings. Commander, those pods will never make it. The geostabilizer isn't just making things worse, it's learning. Each attempt to approach triggers a stronger response. You have a better solution. Cadet Rodriguez, the commander's tone was sharp, but I noticed she didn't dismiss him outright. Actually, yes, Marcus pulled up a holographic display of the station's layout. The main problem isn't the lava or even the heat. It's the equipment itself. Someone needs to get inside and shut it down manually. A moment of stunned silence followed. That's impossible, Kira Blackstar exclaimed. The approach zone is hot enough to melt our strongest alloys. Marcus shrugged. For your technology, maybe, but humans have some unique advantages when it comes to heat resistance. Explain, Commander PX Tal demanded. Our bodies are equipped with a natural cooling system, sweating. Combined with our endurance and thermal regulation, we can survive brief exposure to temperatures that would cook most species. He paused, then added with a grin, plus I brought my old firefighting gear from Earth. Made some modifications to it too. You brought what I couldn't help but ask. Always be prepared, Marcus quoted cheerfully. First rule of being a human: bring equipment for the worst possible scenario, then figure out how to make it work in an even worse one. The commander's voice cut through our exchange. Dr. Winters, what's your status? Critical, came the reply, punctuated by static. Environmental systems at 15%. Containment field failing. We have maybe 20 minutes before total system collapse. Marcus was already pulling equipment from his pack gear that definitely wasn't standard issue. Here's my proposal, he said, his voice taking on that unnervingly calm tone again. I can reach the station through the maintenance tunnel. It's narrow enough that the convection currents are less severe. Once inside, I can manually override the geostabilizer and get those people out. And how exactly do you plan to deal with the superheated air? The toxic gases, Yuri asked, all 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus held up what looked like a modified breathing apparatus. Compressed air system from my diving gear, rated for volcanic vents. Added some filters I borrowed from the chemistry lab. He pointed to his protective suit. And this beauty is lined with aerogel and phase change materials. Good for about 10 minutes in extreme heat. That's insane, someone muttered. That's human engineering, Marcus corrected. We've been dealing with fire since we first figured out how to make it. Trust me, this isn't even the craziest rescue I've attempted. Commander PX Tao's voice carried both authority and concern. Cadet Rodriguez, you understand the risks. This goes beyond standard training parameters. With respect, Commander, nothing about Earth is standard. This, he gestured at the churning volcano. This is Tuesday back home. Well, maybe Thursday. Definitely not weekend material, though. A new tremor shook the ground, and fresh warnings flashed across our displays. The research station's integrity was failing faster than predicted. Very well, the commander said after a moment. But you'll need a support team. Cadet Blue Moon, your squad will provide backup from the safe zone. Monitor his vitals and maintain comm links. I felt my gill flaps flutter in surprise. Yes, Commander. Marcus was already gearing up, checking seals and connections with practiced efficiency. One more thing, he said, pulling something from his pack. Anyone know how to use a GoPro? Might as well get some footage for the Academy's archives. You want to record this? Kira asked incredulously. Sure. My old rescue squad back home would never believe this story without proof. Plus, think of the training value. As I helped him secure the camera to his helmet, I had to ask, aren't you afraid? He paused, and for a moment I saw something different in his expression. Not fear, exactly, but respect for the danger. Here's the thing about humans, he said quietly. We're not fearless. We just decided a long time ago that fear doesn't get to make our decisions for us. The ground shook again, and new fissures opened around us, spewing toxic gases and steam. Marcus checked his gear one final time, then gave us that unsettling human smile. Besides, he added, his voice crackling through the comm link, someone once told me that crazy is just another word for innovative under pressure. Now, who's ready to watch a human dive into a volcano? Looking at his confident stance, I suddenly understood why humans had earned their reputation across the galaxy. It wasn't just their physical resilience or their technological adaptability. It was their absolute, unshakable conviction that impossible was just another word for hasn't been done yet. Rescue mission is a go, Commander PX Tal announced. May the stars guide your path, Cadet Rodriguez. Marcus saluted, then turned toward the maintenance tunnel entrance. Stars are great, and all, he replied, but I'll settle for good old human stubbornness. Time to show you all why they call Earth the death world. And with that, he began his descent into what any sane being would consider certain doom. But then again, nobody had ever accused humans of being sane. The next few minutes were a blur of activity as Marcus made his final preparations. From my position at the monitoring station, I watched with a mixture of professional interest and pure horror. My data recorder was running at maximum capacity. The Academy would definitely want every detail of this insanity. Equipment check complete, Marcus announced, his voice steady through the comm link. Primary oxygen system green, backup system green, cooling system active. He ran through his checklist with practiced efficiency that seemed completely at odds with his usual casual demeanor. For temperature monitoring online, reported Kira Blackstar, who'd taken charge of the biometric feeds. Though I'm not sure what's normal for a human. These readings can't be right. If you're seeing numbers that look like they should belong to a cooking device, those are probably accurate, Marcus replied cheerfully. We humans run hot, especially under pressure. The maintenance tunnel entrance gaped before him like the maw of some ancient beast. Steam poured from its depths, carrying the acrid smell of dissolved minerals and superheated rock. Our environmental suit sensors were screaming warnings about the temperature, toxicity, and radiation levels. Last chance to reconsider. Cadet Rodriguez, Commander PX Tal's voice carried a note of what might have been concern. Marcus adjusted his modified helmet. With respect, Commander, those scientists have about 15 minutes of breathable air left. Reconsidering isn't a luxury we can afford, he paused, then added, though I wouldn't mind some music. Anyone know any good volcano diving songs? This is not the time for I began, but was cut off by Marcus humming something that his translator identified as through the fire and flames. Commencing descent, he announced, and stepped into the tunnel. The next few minutes were the most surreal of my Academy career. Through Marcus's helmet camera, we watched as he navigated the increasingly hostile environment. The tunnel walls glowed with heat, and occasional bursts of steam reduced visibility to near zero. Temperature approaching critical levels for most known materials, Yuri Nova reported, his voice trembling. How is his equipment not melting? Trade secret, Marcus grunted, climbing down a particularly treacherous section. Let's just say humans have gotten really good at dealing with things that want to kill us. Speaking of which, these gas readings are getting interesting. Interesting is not the word I would use, I muttered, watching my displays flash with ever more urgent warnings. The atmospheric composition in the tunnel would have been lethal to most species in seconds. Point Gamma, status report, Marcus called out as he reached a junction. Dr. Winters' voice came through, weaker than before. Environmental systems at 8%. The geostabilizer's gone completely haywire. The containment field is creating some kind of feedback loop with the volcanic activity. Classic case of good intentions meeting Murphy's Law, Marcus commented, taking a reading from his wrist computer. Betting the designers never considered what would happen if the dampening fields reversed polarity. How can you be so casual about this, Kira demanded. You're literally climbing into an active volcano. Would you prefer I panic? Marcus's response was punctuated by a grunt as he squeezed through a narrow section. Besides, this is actually pretty cool. No pun intended. I watched his vital signs with growing amazement. His heart rate was elevated but steady, his breathing controlled. Even his core temperature, while higher than any of our species could survive, remained within what his files listed as acceptable human range. Approaching final descent to station level, Marcus reported. And wow, you all need to see this. The mineral formations down here are incredible. The camera feed showed a cavern that looked like something from a nightmare. Rivers of molten rock flowed along the walls, and crystal formations caught the light in ways that hurt my eyes. The research station sat on a relatively stable platform, but it was now surrounded by a moat of liquid fire. That's impossible to cross, Commander PX Tau stated. The heat alone. Impossible is just a word humans haven't gotten around to ignoring yet, Marcus replied. Besides, I see a path. It's not a good path, but it's a path. My gills fluttered in alarm as I realized what he was planning. You can't be serious. Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of how awesome this is going to be, Marcus said. And then he did something that made every cadet watching gasp in horror. He jumped. The camera feed became a blur of motion as Marcus leaped from his position to a narrow outcropping, then immediately launched himself toward another before the rock could melt under his feet. It was like watching someone play a demented game of hopscotch where each mistake meant instant incineration. This is actually pretty fun, Marcus called out, his voice only slightly strained as he made another impossible leap. Reminds me of that lava parkour course we set up back in Hawaii. Lava, what several voices asked in unison. Story for another time, he replied, landing on the platform beside the station's emergency airlock. Made it. Dr. Winters, I'm at your door. Hope you don't mind if I let myself in. The next few minutes were a blur of technical jargon as Marcus worked to override the station's systems. Through it all, he maintained a running commentary that switched between scientific observations and what he called dad jokes about heat and fire. Got it, he finally announced. Geostabilizer is offline. Primary systems restored. Now, who's ready for the fun part? There's a fun part, I ask weakly, of course. Now we get to evacuate 5 scientists across this lovely lava moat. Dr. Winters, please tell me one of you knows how to play the floor as lava. The rescue itself was a masterclass in human ingenuity and what I can only describe as controlled insanity. Marcus rigged a makeshift pulley system using his climbing gear and pieces of the station's equipment, creating what he called a zip line over the molten rock. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, he announced as he secured the first scientist to the line. Welcome to Marcus Rodriguez's Volcanic Express. Please keep all appendages inside the ride at all times, and remember, screaming is perfectly acceptable. One by one, the scientists were transported across the gap. Each crossing was accompanied by Marcus's increasingly bizarre commentary and what he claimed were classic human evacuation songs. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was actually just minutes, everyone was safely across. Marcus was the last one out, pausing only to grab what he called some really cool samples and take a few more readings. As he made his final crossing, the platform behind him finally gave way, collapsing into the lava below. He landed on solid ground just as a fresh tremor shook the cavern. And that's why we always have an exit strategy, he said, helping Dr. Winters to her feet. Now, who's up for some marshmallows? No, too soon. Watching him lead the rescued scientists back up the maintenance tunnel, I found myself reevaluating everything I thought I knew about humans. They weren't just death-worlders who could survive extreme conditions. They were beings who looked at those conditions, calculated the odds of survival, then proceeded to ignore those calculations in favor of doing what they believed was right. Mission accomplished, Commander Marcus reported, as we helped the scientists into emergency medical pods. All personnel recovered, minimal equipment loss, and bonus geological data collected. Plus, I got some great footage for my personal blog. You're what I started to ask, but decided some questions were better left unanswered. As the emergency response teams swarmed around us and the volcano began to stabilize, I watched Marcus casually strip off his heat-scarred gear while explaining to an amazed group of cadets how humans had originally discovered fire and decided to make friends with it. In that moment, I finally understood why humans were both feared and respected across the galaxy. It wasn't just their physical capabilities or their technical innovations. It was their fundamental approach to the universe, their ability to look at certain death and treat it as an interesting challenge to overcome. "Hey Zix," Marcus called out, interrupting my thoughts. "Want to help me analyze these mineral samples? I think I found something really unique down there." Looking at his eager expression, I couldn't help but wonder what it must be like to live in a universe where certain doom was just another Tuesday afternoon. Then again, maybe that was the secret to human success. They simply refused to accept that doom was ever truly certain. 3 days after what became known as the volcano incident, I sat in the Academy's main hall, watching Commander PX Tal address the assembled cadets. The mood was a strange mix of ceremonial formality and barely contained excitement, not unlike Marcus himself, who sat in the front row, somehow managing to look both proud and slightly embarrassed. In the history of the Galactic Military Academy, Commander PX Tal began, her scales shifting in the formal pattern of official recognition. "We have never had to create a new award category in the middle of a training cycle." She paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Until now." The commander held up a medallion that seemed to glow with an inner fire, quite literally, as I later learned it had been forged from materials collected from the volcano itself. "Cadet Marcus Rodriguez," she announced, "for displaying exceptional courage, remarkable ingenuity, and what your species calls completely bonkers levels of creative problem solving, we present you with the Academy's first Deathworlder Distinguished Service Award." Marcus stood to accept the medal, and I noticed he'd somehow convinced the quartermaster to modify his dress uniform to include extra pockets, probably for more emergency gear. "Thank you, Commander," he said, then grinned. "Though I have to point out that on Earth, this would barely qualify for a weekend adventure trip." The assembly hall erupted in a mixture of laughter and concerned murmuring. I noticed several instructors making notes, probably updating their Understanding Human Behavior manuals again. After the ceremony, our class gathered in the recreation dome. The usual species-based groupings had disappeared. Instead, cadets from all worlds clustered around Marcus, peppering him with questions about Earth and human approaches to survival. "So you're telling me," Kira Blackstar asked, her luminescent spots pulsing with curiosity, "that human children actually practice emergency scenarios as a game?" "Sure," Marcus replied, helping himself to his third serving of protein bars. The rescue had apparently worked up quite an appetite. The floor is lava, fire drills, duck and cover. We turn survival training into entertainment. Makes it stick better. "But why would you need such training?" Lisa Chen wondered. "Surely your civilization has evolved beyond such dangers." Marcus laughed. "Other way around. We evolved because of the dangers. Earth doesn't believe in giving anyone a break, so we learned to treat every obstacle as a challenge rather than a threat." I watched as he pulled out his data pad, showing pictures of what he called extreme sports, humans deliberately putting themselves in dangerous situations for fun. The other cadets' reactions ranged from horror to fascination. The Academy's response to the volcano incident went far beyond a simple medal. The curriculum was being revised to include what they called Human Innovative Crisis Response Training. Though personally, I thought How to Think Like a Crazy Person and Survive would have been a more accurate title. Dr. Winters and her team had not only survived but were excitedly analyzing the data Marcus had collected during the rescue. Apparently, his quick samples had revealed new information about volcanic behavior that might help prevent similar incidents in the future. Recording final entry regarding the volcano incident, I spoke into my personal log later that evening. "The Academy Board has requested my observations as the primary witness." I paused, considering my words carefully. The official report will note Cadet Rodriguez's exceptional performance, his innovative use of Earth-based technology, and his successful rescue of the research team. But there's something more important that needs to be recorded. Through my window, I could see Marcus in the Academy's workshop, already modifying more of his equipment. Apparently, the volcano experience had given him ideas for improvements. We've always known humans were different. We classified them as death worlders, studied their physical capabilities, and tried to understand their technology. But we missed something fundamental. It's not just that humans can survive extreme conditions, it's how they approach those conditions. Where we see certain death, they see a challenge. Where we establish safety protocols, they create backup plans for their backup plans, then practice those plans as games. They don't just survive their world, they embrace its dangers with something they call enthusiasm. A small explosion from the workshop interrupted my recording. Through the smoke, I saw Marcus emerge, his face covered in soot, but wearing that characteristic human smile. "Don't worry," he called out to the gathering crowd. That was totally supposed to happen. Now I know exactly how not to do it. I turned back to my log. Perhaps that's the real lesson of the volcano incident. Humans don't just overcome impossible situations, they learn from them, adapt to them, and somehow manage to enjoy the process. It's simultaneously terrifying and inspiring. The Academy's files now list Earth as not just a death world, but as what humans call a teaching environment, though I'm not sure any of us are ready for their style of education. Later that night, as I passed the workshop on my way to the dormitory, I found Marcus still tinkering with his equipment. "Hey Zix," he called out. "I've been thinking about improving our rescue protocols. How do you feel about volcanoes that are underwater?" I felt my gills flutter in alarm. "Please tell me that's not your next project." He just smiled, that unsettling human smile. "Well, someone's got to write the manual on underwater volcano diving. Might as well be us, right?" Looking at his eager expression, I realized that this was just the beginning. Humans hadn't just joined the Galactic Military Academy, they were about to revolutionize it, one impossible survival scenario at a time. And somehow, despite my better judgment, I found myself looking forward to it. After all, as Marcus would say, impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet by a human. "End recording," I said, then turned to Marcus. "Tell me more about these underwater volcanoes. But first, please explain why you're holding what appears to be a modified food replicator." His grin widened. "Ever heard of something called s'mores?" The Academy would never be the same.